Good afternoon, and welcome to the August webinar presented by the Recruitment, Training, and Support Center at the Federation for Children with Special Needs. My name is Janie Kreco, and I am the Training and Support Specialist at RTSC. Today's webinar, the ACE study, How You Can Help Students Build Resilience, will discuss the background of the seminal survey and what educators and parents can do to help build skills to adapt to the impact of adverse childhood experiences. Our presenter today is Sarah Stevenson, Communications Coordinator for the Federation for Children with Special Needs. She is also a school counseling graduate student at the University of Massachusetts in Boston. She has experience working with children in foster care and has completed graduate research on the effects of trauma and adverse childhood experiences on learning and life outcomes for traumatized youth. Our technical producer today is Emily Gaudet. I will also be online to guide the discussion and field your questions. If you are interested in learning more about the Federation, please go to our website at fcsn.org and explore all the different programs, including the Special Education Surrogate Parent Program, which sponsors these webinars. Our webinar today is being recorded and will be available on the RTSC website under the link Resources for Everyone. During the webinar, please type your questions in the toolbox and feel free to engage with other attendees as appropriate. We will hold all the questions until the end of Sarah's presentation and answer as many as we can for the time allowed. So, Sarah, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar, the ACE study, How Adverse Childhood Experiences Impact Life Outcomes. Topics for today's webinar include findings of the original Adverse Childhood Experience, or ACE study, the changing focus from symptoms to underlying causes, the impact on schools and families, and what's happening now with ACEs. So the ACE study was a 1997 collaboration between the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and Kaiser Permanente's Health Appraisal Clinic in San Diego. The ACE study was actually spurred by the work done at an obesity clinic, where researchers realized that people who were successfully losing weight in their weight loss program were the ones dropping out. They couldn't understand why, if patients were having success, they would then drop out of the program. The researchers had these patients give them a detailed life history, and they found that childhood sexual abuse was remarkably common. They realized that no other medical professionals had asked questions about such histories and had never made the connection between abuse and obesity. Further, the researchers began to understand the surprising underlying causes of their patients' desire to drop out when met with success. They had never considered the social and sexual expectations that were brought on by major weight loss. The connection between underlying causes and health outcomes set the foundation for the ACE study. These findings became the basis for the ACE study, where over 17,000 HMO members went through standard physical examinations and filled out detailed questionnaires on their childhood experiences of abuse, neglect, and family dysfunction. The researchers then took the answers from the questionnaires and cross-referenced them with the physical examinations of the adult patients. So the demographics of the ACE study are important because they included mostly white middle-class participants. This demonstrates that adverse childhood experiences are not solely a problem of poor or minority groups, but that they are common amongst all races and socioeconomic backgrounds. Some interesting points of the demographic are that 74% had attended college, and the participants were 50% men and 50% women. So why is the ACE study important? ACEs have such a powerful effect on a person's health and well-being as they grow into adulthood that the link between ACEs and life outcomes are no longer a correlation but a causation. ACEs are now seen as the cause of many health epidemics in the U.S. So the study found that ACEs are extremely common and that just over half of the study's participants had experienced one or more categories of ACEs. Further, 1 in 4 had been experienced to 2 categories, and 1 in 16 were exposed to 4 categories. What does this mean for these children? It means that a child with 4 or more adverse childhood experiences is 46 times more likely to have learning or emotional problems. Similarly, the life expectancy of a person with 6 or more adverse childhood experiences is 20 years shorter than a person with 0 adverse childhood experiences. So when considering the nature of adverse childhood experiences, it makes sense that they would occur in groups, or that one ACE would make another ACE more likely. And exposure to one category of ACEs actually leads to an 80% likelihood of exposure to another category. Think about a situation where a child grows up in a home with an alcoholic father. It's extremely likely that other aspects of the child's home life will be dysfunctional as well. So here are some statistics when compared between a person with 0 ACEs and a person with 4 or more ACEs. There is an increased likelihood of contracting hepatitis, increased likelihood of contracting a sexually transmitted disease, increased likelihood of having chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. And further, the likelihood of suffering from depression goes up by 460% compared to a person with 0 ACEs and a person with 4 ACEs, as well as an extremely large increase in attempted suicides. So the impact of the ACE study helps to recognize and acknowledge that people are injured, and the ACE study points to the root of the problem instead of treating symptoms. Later in the webinar, we'll talk more about the term injured and why it's used by professionals to talk about people who have experienced ACEs. The ACE study helps to recognize the important difference between a symptom and the underlying cause of problem behaviors. If we go back to the participants in the weight loss study, the patient's obesity was a solution to their problem, which was sexual abuse, not the problem itself. Therefore, when doctors only treated their patient's obesity without recognizing the underlying issues of sexual abuse, the patients were unsuccessful in losing weight. The root cause, in this case, sexual abuse, also needed to be examined and treated in order for the person to completely heal. So if ACEs are left unacknowledged and unrecognized, they increase the risk of depression and suicide attempts, protective unconscious devices like somatization, which is when psychological distress is expressed as physical symptoms. So like when a child is really nervous about a test and complains about a stomachache, and dissociation, which is the detachment of the mind from emotional states or even from the body. It's characterized by a sense of the world as a dreamlike or unreal place and may be accompanied by poor memory of specific events. And this is used as a protective mechanism to shield yourself from traumatic experiences. When people are not given adaptive ways to cope with adverse childhood experiences, they often cope in ways that are self-destructive in the long term, like self-medicating with drugs and alcohol, which give them a short escape from the issues they are facing. Often, as a society, we view issues like suicide, drugs, and alcohol as the problem, when in reality it is the only way people have learned to cope with things they have experienced in their lives. These problems can be seen as markers for ACEs that often lie buried in time and are often concealed by secrecy and shame. So some key takeaways from the ACE study are that ACEs are extremely common. They occur in clusters rather than single experiences. The cumulative impact of multiple exposures can be captured in an ACE score. The ACE score likely captures the cumulative neurodevelopment consequences of traumatic stress. The ACE score has a strong graded relationship to numerous health, social, and behavioral problems throughout a person's lifespan, and these ACE-related problems tend to be comorbid or co-occurring. And again, ACEs are profound, proportionate, and long-lasting effects on emotional state. The higher the ACE score, the more likely a person will struggle with health and social emotional well-being. Neurobiology can now confirm that ACEs alter brain development. When children live in unsafe, stressful environments, their brains begin to adapt to heightened states of awareness and danger. As children constantly live in states of fight, freeze, or flee, other portions of their brain, specifically those parts needed to learn, become weak. Children's brains are built on scaffolding, where one learned skill is built on another. However, when children are not able to play or are exposed to erratic behavior in changing environments, they're not able to develop those basic skills to grow off of. And due to these changes in a traumatized child's brain, these children may have trouble with language skills, organizing material, difficulty understanding cause and effect, or taking another's perspective. They also may not be able to pay attention in class and have executive functioning and trouble regulating emotions. So now we're going to have the questionnaire that the ACE study used to determine what your ACE score would be. And we want to do this as a way to help everyone understand how ACEs affect people's lives and specifically your own life. It'll help you to hopefully gain a deeper understanding and empathy of the children you work with. Acknowledge and recognize your ability to overcome ACEs, and maybe identify who or what helped you to do so. So the next couple of slides just have the questions on them, and we'll give you a couple of minutes on each slide, and you can write down your answers. So give yourself a 1 for every yes and a 0 for every no question. So just so everybody knows, this is just a survey for yourself. We're not collecting answers. It's just for something for yourself. Something to think about as you're answering these questions. For the children you work with, these are literal descriptions of what they might have gone through. As you can see, these questions are extremely specific, and that goes to the nature of the survey. So I'll give you a couple of seconds to just tally up your scores. And again, this is just something for yourself. So now that you have an idea of what your ACE score would be, how will your ACE score inform how you manage your students or children and build their resilience and self-confidence? Dr. Sandra Bloom from Drexel University talks a lot about using our growing knowledge about the short and long-term effects of ACEs and how it requires a shift in the way we view all human problematic behavior. She talks about the need to stop viewing people as either sick or bad, which are beliefs that lead to the problems associated with both our mental health system and the criminal justice system. Instead, begin viewing all of these problems as the result of injuries, some injuries to the body, to the mind, some to the ability to relate, and some to the sense of right and wrong. As educators and parents, we can begin to give our students and children the tools they need to begin to heal and ultimately succeed. So here we have, we can see the shift from focusing on problem behaviors and punishments to a deeper understanding of why a child might be acting the way they're acting. As you can see on the left side, a not trauma-informed school would focus on behavioral issues and reactive punishments. They may take away privileges, give out detentions or school suspensions, and there's really a strong focus on what is wrong with the student. On the right side, there's a trauma-informed approach which would focus more on social and emotional factors that support academic achievement. So teacher support, coping strategies, mental health well-being, and a strong focus on what happened to the student. So again, the quote in the middle would kind of reflect a not trauma-informed description of a student without delving deeper into what that student has gone through and why those qualities exist. So teachers and parents can help the student identify coping strategies, give support, and identify resources that could assist the student further with mental health issues so that the student has the tools to better handle a similar situation in the future. When ACEs are not considered, we can see the effects of policies like zero tolerance through the high number of students that have been expelled. In Massachusetts in 2012 and 2013, 42,000 students were expelled in Massachusetts. Nationally, 100,000 students were expelled in 2011. These students are often the ones that need the maximum amount of classroom time. By removing them from school, their options become severely limited and are effectively pushed through the school to prison pipeline. So if you just want to take a look at this infographic, it's a great visual representation of the difference in student outcomes when zero tolerance policies are used versus restorative practice policies. As you can see, Carlos's problem begins at home, which affects his mood and behaviors throughout the day. When using zero tolerance, Carlos ends up missing class, being held in a juvenile detention facility, has an arrest record, and faces suspension, which would mean more missed class time. In addition, Carlos most likely learned nothing about how to better react in a similar situation. On the other hand, using restorative practices, Carlos is involved in the resolution process, agrees to make amends for his behavior, and meets with a counselor and his parents to work through issues at home. The restorative practices focus more on why Carlos is having these issues and how best to support him in the future. The link to this infographic is at the bottom of the slide if you want to access it at another time. It's right there. So progress is being made in Massachusetts. Massachusetts has become a national leader in supporting schools to create safe and supportive environments. Chapter 222 mandates that students cannot be suspended without an educational alternative, and this ensures that those most vulnerable students still receive an education regardless of their behavioral issues. Also, earlier in the summer, Governor Patrick signed the gun reform legislation, which incorporates provisions of the Safe and Supportive Schools Act. And this act will serve as a foundation for all students, including those who have had traumatic experiences, to learn and succeed. Progress is also being made in California earlier this summer. The Senate approved the concurrent resolution to encourage statewide policies to reduce children's exposure to childhood experiences. They note that it's more effective and less costly to positively influence the healthy development of a child's brain than to attempt to correct poor learning, health, and behaviors later on. So as schools move away from zero tolerance and towards more trauma-sensitive, ACE-sensitive ways of doing things, they have a strong focus on high-quality early childhood education, attention to social and emotional learning, continual monitoring of student attendance and academic progress, intensive instruction for those falling behind, alternatives to school push-out, like restorative-based practices we just talked about, and Chapter 222, fostering a positive school climate, making sure that schools are safe and that students feel safe in them, and engagement with parents, families, and communities. So that just about wraps up our webinar for today. We will be opening up to questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Sarah. That is some great information and statistics that you've given us. One thing. Hello? Okay. Thank you, Sarah. We just had a little technical difficulty. I'm thinking people can hear me now. Okay. Wonderful statistics that we can all look at and kind of ponder, as well as the personal ACE study, which I have taken myself. So make sure to stop and think about these kids that have these very high ACEs, 6 and above, and how difficult getting through their day must be. We have a couple of questions that have already come in, and more are coming in. One of the things that I think was misunderstood is that I think Sarah said the wrong word. There were not 42,000 kids expelled in Massachusetts in 1 year. They were suspended. And suspensions always far outnumber expulsions. And of course, Chapter 222, if everybody is aware of that, makes it very difficult to expel students. In fact, it makes it illegal now to expel children for more than the school year, and alternative education must be provided in Massachusetts. Someone had asked also about restorative justice or restorative practices. They are real, and actually the Boston Public School got quite a large grant for this school year to begin restorative practices in the Boston Public School system. And it is a wonderful thing, and it's very effective. It's evidence-based. You can go online and find out, look at the curriculums that are being used throughout the country, actually throughout the world. So I'm going to throw some questions at Sarah, and if Sarah, if you're having trouble answering them, I can help you. Let's see. All right, so a lot of people are pointing out the 42,000.
Sorry about that.
They made it look like Massachusetts
wrong.
was horrible with suspending or expelling kids all the time, but that was just a little, whatever you call a mistake when you're speaking. A faux pas. All right, so here's a question, and this is a great question. Can you elaborate on the term injured as it relates to those affected with adverse experience? And that was one of the things that stood out for me too. So talk a little bit about that, Sarah.
Sure. So I think the most important thing when talking about kids who have faced adverse childhood experiences, a lot of times they exhibit behaviors and may do things that cause people to label them as bad or sick, like there's something in them that's wrong with them. And that's not true. I think that the term injured helps people to realize that nothing is wrong with these kids. They've just been injured. Things in their lives have happened that have hurt their development. They have hurt their abilities to verbalize what they need to communicate with other people, to make relationships with other people. And if we view these kids, these people as injured, it opens up the door for healing and for success in the future.
Right, and I like that word. I've never heard it before, but it does kind of open the door, as you say, for hope that it can turn itself around. And that's what educators and parents are working on throughout the country as how to help these kids to heal. And I want to thank the person who pointed out that the slide was actually incorrect. That was my fault because I retyped it. So I apologize. I put a typo in there. So I got you into all kinds of trouble, Sarah. I apologize. Okay, so let's see. We've got another one here. Okay, so this is from Wendy, our best webinar attendee. She volunteers at MAC, the Massachusetts Advocates for Children, and she says she gets lots of calls from parents who are complaining that their children are being sent home. And the school will say child is not being suspended, they're just being sent home. Is this considered a suspension? And of course, the parents and the foster parents and the SESPs are concerned that they're missing academics when they're sent home, and of course they are. So how I understand it, Wendy, and again, I'm not sure this is specifically stated, is that the schools will be watching the times for suspensions much more carefully this year. First of all, it's part of the legislation that they have to keep very close records on suspensions and sending kids out of the academic part of the school day. And I think what's going to happen is we're going to see a lot of what they call in-school suspensions, where they're not sent home, but placed out of the classroom where there might be some issues, and somebody will be helping them in a different location so that they can continue their academic work. I think that was the ideal situation, that if the kids are having difficulty staying in the classroom, they won't be sent home as frequently unless it's a dangerous situation. Okay, so another question is, does anybody train the schools about injured kids? My local school really needs this information, and if you don't mind, Sarah, I can answer this.
Yeah, absolutely.
We as our program has been in the last year doing a lot of trauma and learning trainings throughout the state. We have been shadowing the Department of Children and Families, big trauma-informed seminars that they have. And I have to say that we have literally people calling every day from schools and clinics and various places asking for us to come out and do the same training for them. I'm not sure that it's out there 100% yet. We are doing our best to get out there and train as many people as we can. One of the things that Sarah used for this seminar is the famous Purple Book, put it out by the Massachusetts Advocates for Children. It's called Helping Traumatized Children Learn. They have a website, and I believe the website is called Helping Traumatized Children Learn. You can certainly link to it from typing that into Google, and you can get a free download of this book. They also have a Teal book out, which is part 2 of Helping Traumatized Children Learn, and that's the actual way that schools can start making their making safe and supportive schooling happening. So both of those things are out there, free for download, and that's certainly something that schools can take a look at on their own. And then somebody has asked also how much current training is there for current school administrators and professional staff in regards to the ACE study. You may know more than I do, Sarah, but I don't think it's a lot. It's amazing to me, Sarah and I were just talking this morning, that the fact that this study is now almost 20 years old and still going on, but that so relatively few people know about it and the enormous impact it's had on neurodevelopment of kids. So you can all act as disciples and get out there and talk about it with all of the people that you might come in contact with in your schools or in your communities, and we'll try and do our part. Okay, any other questions here? You've got a few more minutes. I know it's a lot to digest, and I love that you did the ACE study, Sarah, because I think it makes it very clear to people that most people have at least one ACE in their background. Oh yeah. Okay, it says here, on the questionnaire, each question has several negative behaviors to score. However, what if there is only one behavior in that question that the child was subjected to? Would you score that a yes?
Yes, you would, and it it usually is a concurrent thing, that it didn't just happen one time, but it happened multiple times in that person's childhood. But any of those could warrant a yes.
Okay, and I think what you said about the correlation between one ACE and another, none of these are going to act in isolation.
Right.
It's possible they would, but if it's a behavior that has happened one time, it probably would happen several times, and then other behaviors or other ACEs would occur at the same time or throughout the child's life. Okay, a couple of more minutes, and we're open for questions. These are all great questions, by the way. If you need to know more about the ACE study, we did send out a handout that was written by Dr. Fileti, who is actually the original researcher of the ACE study. He wrote the article in German, which is amazing to me, and then translated it for everybody into English. It's a really, really nice compilation of the whole ACE study. It was written in 2002, I think, right, Sarah?
Yes.
So it was about 10 years after the original survey. The survey continues to go on, just so everybody knows. They are still following those 17,000 people. And Sarah, I don't know if you mentioned that many states are doing their own ACE studies now. Some cities are doing their own ACE studies. And it kind of goes on and on as to how people are doing their surveys. The survey questions can vary according to the particular ACE study. There's a big push now to include socioeconomic status, because a lot of people see poverty as an ACE because of the high stress of kids that grow up in poverty. And here's another question. I have many adopted children. Much of the ACEs contribute to attachment issues. This plays out in school. The school doesn't understand attachment issues. Would this be a better way to present it to the school?
Yeah, I think that if it's a way that helps people understand the underlying issues, I think that it would be a great way to share that information with the school. And again, you're sharing why your child is acting the way that they do, and that there are concrete reasons for it, and that it's not just that your child has, behavior issues or is misbehaving because your child wants to misbehave, but there are actual concrete reasons and things that happened that lead to these behaviors.
And Wendy, again, she put up the actual address of the ACE study. Very easy, acestudy.org. And that's actually the ACE study through the Centers for Disease Control. I believe that's their website.
You can also access it through the CDC website as well.
Okay, all right. So, and there's lots and lots written about it out there, and a lot of new surveys are being done. And a great question just came through. I wonder if severe medical issues starting in early childhood and continuing throughout the life of school career K to 12 are considered under the ACE category. That's a great question. That is actually considered a different kind of trauma. That's considered medical trauma. But should you combine the medical trauma with the ACE study, that would have a compounded impact, I'm sure, on the development of the kids, especially the neurodevelopment. So I don't know if there's any ACE studies out there, and I don't know all the ACE studies, whether or not that is an indicator or not. Have you ever seen that?
I haven't. I know that different ACE studies do look at different indicators, so there might be one on medical trauma.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wendy, you're saying that it has the survey, explain a little bit more what you're saying, Wendy. You said you had the survey that you took, and I don't know where that is, had medical issues in it. Poor Wendy has to actually type it in here. Okay. Oh, this is interesting. Okay, so Michael, where do the approaches to supporting kids with ACEs intersect with ABA-oriented approaches, for example, FBAs and function-based interventions? I have to think about that for a minute. ABA, of course, is applied behavioral analysis, usually used for kids on the spectrum. I've heard people talk about using ABA for kids with trauma. I'm not sure how effective it has been. Because of the fact that and I'll tell you the reason I've heard why it's not that effective, is that the rote approach to ABA is something that is very frustrating to kids with trauma. So I did actually ask a few people who are experts in the field of ACEs about that, and I don't think there's been a lot of studies about ABA and the ACEs, honestly. Okay. Let's see, Wendy, the survey we took already here today is in the ACE website. Okay, that's right. So you can, the ACE survey is also up on the website. Mm-hmm. That's where I think Sarah got it from. And it says that the higher the score, the more problems the child will have. Right. And she says that it has nothing to do with medical trauma. That's true. The ones that the typical ACE surveys do not include any kind of medical trauma. And Ellen, you're saying that you feel like ABA can exacerbate trauma. It may be re-traumatizing to try ABA with a traumatized kid. They have a very low frustration level. And if you do the ABA, that rote type of learning with them, they can get very, very frustrated with it and a little bit explosive. Also, ABA relies a lot on rewards. As a consequence, a positive consequence for behavior, and I think that Sarah did mention that cause and effect relationship for kids with high ACEs is sometimes non-existent. Okay, so someone else also talked about the half of the expelled kids are in Massachusetts. Those were not expelled, and I apologize on my behalf. Those kids were suspended in Massachusetts, not expelled. And suspensions are always much higher than expulsions. In zero tolerance schools, if you're expelled, and this used to be true in Massachusetts, if you're expelled, no other school in Massachusetts needed to take you in, so you were done. And in a lot of school districts in the country, that is still true. However, that is over in Massachusetts as of July 1st last year. We are now under Chapter 222, where schools must educate kids even if they are asked to leave for a temporary period of time. Alrighty, let's see if we have anything else. I'm just scrolling here. Okay, somebody else who has a child. Ellen, that's you again. You had a traumatized child who really was re-traumatized by the ABA. So we do need to do more research on that. So if there's anybody out there who's a researcher, please let's take a look at that. And a question: if schools do not have policies and ways of recognizing high ACEs in students, how do you suggest that we advocate for these students with problems or problem students? Well, again, I'm going to say start with the Purple Book, Helping Traumatized Children Learn. We do have the, I did send out the handout for the Fileti study. You could ask them to take a look at the ace.org site. There's a lot of education that needs to be done out there around ACEs and complex childhood trauma. So as I said, we should all get out there and start spreading the word a little bit more. The Robert Wood Foundation, which is a huge foundation, is spending a lot of their time and effort working with kids with ACEs and setting up model programs for kids with ACEs. The Trauma Center here in Massachusetts is doing a lot of work for kids with high ACEs. So it's certainly beginning, but just like anything that is relatively a new idea and very different than what we've been brought up to believe, the word is slow to get out. All right, so anybody else? We've had a very active questions today. And we still have a bit of time if anybody else wants to chime in here. I feel like I've done a lot of talking. If any other questions come in, Sarah, they're going to be yours. Okay. Wendy Tobin also talks a little bit about the ABA issue, which apparently is a little controversial here on this board. And she's talking about the cultural competence of ABA. That's an interesting thing to talk about. Again, we need a lot more research, I think. We all know ABA is quite effective for kids on the spectrum, so you know, I'm not so sure if it's that effective for kids with other emotional disabilities. Okay, a couple more seconds here and then we'll let you go, have your lunch. And I want to thank you so much. Sarah, can you scroll down, let them see your references?
Oh, yep.
Janet's asking a question about the percentage of the general population that do not have ACEs. I'm thinking because, of course, statisticians make assumptions that say that if you know, 50% of the 17,000 have at least 2 ACEs.
At least one.
At least one. That we can make the assumption, and I hate making assumptions, that that 50% of the population as a whole has at least 1 ACE. And I've heard it's even higher in more recent ACEs. It's more than 2. And so you can translate that into your workplace, you can translate that into your classroom, that probably half of the people have experienced some kind of childhood trauma, the extent to which we probably don't know. Okay, someone is saying that they would like to share the also the website of the National Child Traumatic Stress Network. Can everybody see these questions, Emily? Okay, it's quite a long address here, but it does talk about medical trauma there in that nctsn.org. Talks about all the different kinds of trauma, and it's a great resource. It's in the national kind of the national place to go for trauma. Also, Think Kids is a great place to learn about trauma, and their particular program is collaborative problem solving. And Stuart Ablon will be at our conference in September. Then that's a conference for SESPs and foster parents on September 30th. Go to our website if you're interested, please. And people are beginning to say thank you, so I think they're ready to go and eat their lunch. So I think we're set. And again, we'll see you next month. Sarah, thank you so much for your diligent research.
Thank you.
All righty. Okay.